Hey. Are you logged? You joining? Okay. I'm actually messaging Meg. Okay.
I'm going to hang up the phone.
Okay. Okay, so yeah, I mean, this will be good because we can wait a couple minutes for anyone to get on. And you know what? I had a thought too.
Sure. And then I had one. You go first.
Okay, if someone paid and they don't make it on, we can always email them the recording.
Correct.
And then once it's recorded, then we always have it, and then we can post it anywhere with a clickable link for people to pay for it.
Absolutely. And then I have one thing when you're ready.
Go ahead.
On the website, website mention, instead of the www, Sidney J, etc., do my other one, www, Dr. Sid Speaks. And that's it.
Okay.
Great.
Perfect. Yeah, I always look at these as investments anyhow for future.
Yep.
Can you see on your end that Meg is on?
I saw a second ago that she was on. Yes.
Okay.
Let me ask you this real quick. In the very upper right-hand corner of my screen, I have a little red dot almost saying REC for record. We haven't pressed that yet, correct?
I'm not recording yet.
Yep. Okay.
So it'll look different. It should. I mean, it will for sure on my end.
Okay.
But I haven't recorded yet.
Okay. Can you see how many people have signed on so far?
So far, I'm just seeing Meg.
I see three participants. Yeah.
Is that me, you, and Meg?
Yeah. Now I suddenly saw a message flash up from her. Did you see that?
I saw that.
Okay. All right, 4 participants to be able to change your name from iPad.
Do you know how to do that?
I'm not sure what she means by change my name.
So let's see where your name is. Let me see how I did that before. Okay, if you go down to the button and hit participants.
Okay.
On the right-hand side, it should pop up. Do you see where it's iPad?
Yes.
Hey, Debbie. Yay, Debbie's on. Okay, but let me see here. Hey, Debbie.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good, thank you.
Hi, Debbie.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thanks. Good.
Good.
I'm going to see if I can change it for you.
Okay.
So if you right click on where it says iPad,
Okay, rename.
there you go.
Okay. And I'm just going to put my name.
Yes. There
Got
it is. Okay, so we should wait. What do you think, Dr. Sidney? A couple more minutes because we're waiting on a couple more people.
Yep. Let's wait till 12:05.
12:05. Okay. And Debbie, if you want to, before we start recording, just make, oh, there's Cindy. Make sure
Great.
that you mute your microphone.
Okay. I'm not sure how to do that, but let
If
me,
you, do you see where at the bottom of your screen where it says participants?
yes.
You're gonna hit participants and then you're gonna go to your name. Do you see where your name says Debbie?
Let's see. Oh, let me click on it again. Okay, I do. Mm-hmm.
You should be able to, there you go. Maybe 2 more minutes.
Yep.
So, okay.
Do we have Cindy checked in?
Cindy is checked in. It looks like her camera and her mute is off, and it looks like someone else is coming in. Doesn't have a name though.
Right. Oh, the phone number, 615 number?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay.
Okay, so what I'm gonna need is Cindy and Debbie will need to kind of X out of your video screen so that when we start recording, your video doesn't get sent around the world when this when this hits the World Wide Web before I record. Oh, and okay, total non-video participants. Do you know how to take your video off, Debbie? Same way you did the sound, if you click on your name and you hit the video. Oh, you can come out of your mute because I can't hear you. There
Okay, it says rename.
You should be able to select like how Meg, or there's other people on. Hey there, Amanda. How other people have X'd out their video screen.
Okay. The only thing I'm seeing is mute and rename. I
Okay.
tried to rename, but that's not working. That doesn't do
Okay.
it.
Maybe Meg can help. So thank you guys for coming. Before we hit record, if you want to X out of the video, that way when this goes public, your video isn't everywhere. And basically, you should be able to just X out on the camera or join so that you're just watching us. Does anyone know how to do that? Oh, I think I just figured it out. Let's see.
I think if you put hide self view, maybe
Where's that at?
like it, so I toggle over my picture and then it has mute and then it has 3 buttons, like 3 dots. And then you hit the 3 dots and in that drop down it says hide self view. So I would think I can try it and see if that works.
Yeah, try that and see.
So yeah.
That worked. Thank you.
Oh, great.
Okay, so Dr. Sidney, what are you seeing? Because I'm still seeing everybody.
All I'm seeing right now are me and you
Really? Okay.
with a box that indicates who's on and trying to get on.
Okay, so you just see me and you.
Right. But when Amanda just came on, I saw her. When Debbie came on, I saw her.
Okay.
So I have not seen Cindy or the person with the phone number.
Okay. All right, let's see. Because I can see where I can stop my video, but I don't know if that's on your screen. Okay, so Megan is saying that if you close your video screen, you can go to the bottom of your video screen and hover over Start Video. When you click on Start Video, it should toggle off and you will see a red X over it. So you can go to the bottom of your video screen, hover over Start Video. So like on my screen right now, there's a stop video. So Debbie, if you go to the bottom left hand of your screen, there should be a button that says stop video. Do you see that? There we go.
Okay.
Oh, do you see it, Amanda? Do you see the stop video, Amanda?
No. Where is that?
So if you bring your clicker down
Mm-hmm.
to the left-hand side of your screen, there should be a button that says stop video.
Okay.
Perfect. Also, for everyone that's on, before I click record, make sure that you have mute on. So I think right now, I'm not hearing Debbie anymore, but I'm pretty sure, Amanda, I'm hearing you, and I don't hear anyone else. So just make sure you have the mute, which is the button right next to the stop video button. So you're not muting your computers. You can still hear us. You're just muting the computer. Okay. Dr. Sidney, are you ready?
Ready, willing, and all set.
Perfect. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and hit record.
Okay.
And we'll get started. And one more question before I host. is Meg the meeting host, or are you Dr. Sidney?
I believe I am.
Okay, because it's saying that I need, please request recording permission from the meeting host. So let me see if Megan can. Oops, I sent that to Amanda. We are recording. You're good to go. Okay, so I guess we're good.
Great.
Okay. All right. Thank you for joining us today. I'm so excited to be here with Dr. Sidney. And for our webinar today, we are going to be discussing the psychological and nutritional components in weight loss. And so today I have with me Dr. Sidney Cohen, and he is a licensed psychologist and author of Your Self-Sabotaging Inner Bully and Inner Blocks to Losing Weight. And before I ask Dr. Sidney to tell us about his books, I'm going to ask him some questions, and then I'm going to share some information. And then after, if we have time, which we should be able to take some of your questions. So while we're speaking, if you have questions, you can type it into the box over here on the side. And then when we're finished, we can go over those questions. So thank you for joining us today. And Dr. Sidney, thank you for joining us. And please tell us about your books.
Sure. It's great to be here today with you, Melanie, and I'm really glad for everyone who's listening in. So I wrote 2 books. First one, as Melanie mentioned, is called Your Self-Sabotaging Inner Bully, Standing Up to It Once and For All. And that book, as is in the title, says it's about self-sabotage pretty much across the board. Could be relationships, could be in job situations, and certainly specifically what we're going to be addressing today, of course, is weight loss. And that leads to my second book, which is specifically about sabotaging weight loss. And as Melanie mentioned, it's called Inner Blocks to Losing Weight, Why You Lose the Battle More Than the Weight. So let me tell you a little about the book. And in a nutshell, the inspiration for this book was realizing in a lot of the work that I was doing with people who are sabotaging themselves and staying on the proverbial roller coaster ride of losing weight, regaining and losing and so forth, is, first of all, many of you may realize, but just in case you don't, the recidivism rate for regaining lost weight is over 90%. Pretty high, obviously. Pretty much something that can really raise a lot of questions, as legitimately it should, about the true benefit and success from diet and exercise programs. However, that's not for a second to say that I don't believe that they can't be effective. They most certainly can. What I really wanted to do, though, in writing this book is bring into the mix non-medical issues. So just as a quick aside, if somebody has a metabolic disorder of some type, if somebody's on medication, there are side effects. Those can be legitimate medical/physical reasons that you're having trouble losing weight or keeping it off. That's really, for the most part, the exception. What I address in this book and what I'm going to talk a little about today are psychological reasons, underlying psychological reasons, blocks as I call them, that are what really sabotage people in their efforts to lose weight. And that's kind of what my books are about.
Excellent. So Dr. Sidney, can you tell us what are the psychological blocks to losing weight?
Sure. There are 6 blocks altogether that I talk about in my book. The first one is one I'm going to save for a moment. It's discussion, and it's called addiction to self-rebellion. I'll be getting to that one very shortly. So let me get to the other 5. Second one on the list is anxiety, underlying anxieties, which oftentimes are not the least bit obvious. I mean, you can say to yourself, what can I possibly be anxious about losing weight? I mean, I'm going to look better, I'm going to feel better, my self-esteem is going to be better, I'm healthier. So on the surface, it looks like and can feel like there can't possibly be anything to be anxious about. Well, if you take a look within yourself and are being really honest with yourself, there can be, if not consciously, then subconsciously, certain anxieties you may have. For example, I'll give 2 examples. Let's suppose that you are somebody who's in a relationship and it's a struggling relationship, and you're struggling with whether to stay in the relationship or not, but you're not feeling ready, truly confident to make the break. So it can trigger a lot of anxiety to make the break. Okay, well, let's suppose that you're not very pleased with where your weight is. And you're thinking to yourself, well, you know, if I really lose weight and I really feel better, well, on the one hand, of course, great, great. On the other hand, kind of like, whoa, then I may have to really deal with what it is that I'm so afraid of about ending this relationship, starting back out there. So although, again, it looks like on the surface, I'm going to just keep losing weight because of the benefits, and anxiety about making the break, again, call it being back out there, can subconsciously trigger a sabotaging trend where you end up, no matter how determined you say you are, where you start getting back on a sabotaging path. So that's one example of an underlying anxiety that can kick in. One other quick one. Suppose you're anticipating making a major transition in your life, say in terms of a job. And let's suppose you want to make a transition, but you're not feeling real confident. So if one of the things you're not feeling confident about, you're not feeling very good about how you look these days. Your physical attractiveness in your own eyes isn't where you want it to be. So if you're going to really pursue changing jobs, it can bring in the idea, whoa, I'm not feeling good about how I look, so I don't think I really have a chance. I'm afraid I don't. And so again, it looks like, well, let me just really get to work on losing weight. If you're not really confident about making a major transition, you can sabotage yourself by getting back on the wrong track and getting back into eating more than you should and things you shouldn't, which again, I'll get to in a moment. Okay, a couple other blocks. One of them I call loyalty. Loyalty in this case meaning if you grew up in a family in which food was really a very major part of family life. You know, the stereotype, you're at a big family meal and, you know, mange, eat, and however else in whatever group it's presented, there can be kind of an ingrained sense that food is part of a loyalty to love in a family system. So that's one other possible block. Another one is emotional suppression and emotional deprivation. In a nutshell here, start with deprivation. If you are feeling deprived of fun and enjoyment in your life, well, what's one simpler and easier way to get some pleasure and enjoyment in your life? It's called food. It's called eating. So although, again, it still may be sabotaging your weight loss, to the degree that you're feeling deprived of true fun and pleasure in life in other ways, you're vulnerable on the basis of feeling deprived to get that pleasure more from food. Opposite side of the coin, emotional suppression. That's especially the case where you're having some really intense negative feelings, anger, hurt, jealousy. But what you're doing is you're kind of literally and figuratively stuffing down those negative kind of threatening feelings by eating too much. So another block, again, emotional suppression and deprivation. Another one I call the weight loss curse words. And in a nutshell, what I mean by that is a couple of key words that, although are words that are as commonplace as can be, described as the ultimate, for example, one end of the spectrum being skinny and thin. Well, it's great as it's set up as though that's an ideal to work towards, but skinny and thin, I think, are actually pretty sabotaging because they're perfectionistic standards. You need to set as a goal to become thinner, skinnier, get out of the absolute of thin and skinny. The other end of the spectrum, though, really a curse word, is the word fat. Somebody who preoccupies themselves, convinces themselves, obsesses that they're fat when they really may be nothing of the sort. And even if you are somewhat overweight, to stick with that word is very sabotaging. To say you're overweight, you're more overweight than you'd like to be, those are not curse words. Those are words that you can work with to stay on the path. Last block, power struggles. If you're caught up in a relationship in which you and the other person get into battles about different things, one of which could be, let's say, your weight, and you have a partner who keeps getting on your case, and you know that's not fair, and you know it's really aggravating, and there are other things that he or she don't seem to work on, well, it's kind of like cutting your nose to spite your face, but there are times where you may end up sabotaging your efforts to lose weight In part because there's a power struggle where you're being told you better lose weight. It's very conditional love in that respect. So there are people who can be vulnerable in those power struggles to regaining lost weight and sabotaging. And those are the 6 blocks.
Excellent blocks and so relatable. So Dr. Sidney, what is the #1 psychological block to losing weight?
So the term I use for that is addiction to self-rebellion. Now let me break it down because all those words are obviously familiar words, but let me put them together. So the key term is self-rebellion. What do I mean by self-rebellion? We all know what the word rebellion means. We all know it's usually in the context of an authority person. That's not how I'm using the term rebellion here, though. I'm defining rebellion in this context as doing the opposite of what's in your best interest to do. Okay? That's the working definition of rebellion. Applying it to the whole challenge of weight loss, it then takes on 3 contexts. Number 1, eating more than you should. Number 2, eating things you shouldn't. And number 3, not exercising when you said you were going to. Point then being, each and every time you eat more than you should, eat things you shouldn't, and don't exercise when you said you were going to, in this framework, you are engaging in an act of self-rebellion. And every act of self-rebellion in 1, 2, or all 3 of those categories guarantees you are letting that little inner bully inside of you that wants to sabotage you, you're giving it full rein. Because in each one of those cases, you are going to end up regaining lost weight. You are not disciplining yourself, and that's what self-rebellion is. I throw in the term addiction simply to mention that if you do this as an ongoing regular pattern, well, I define addiction, any type, as any behavior in control of you, rather than you're in control of the behavior. And as a result of that, it causes you some kind of harm. It could be psychological harm, relationship harm, physical harm. So the pattern of self-rebellion, eating more than you should, things you shouldn't, not exercising, are all examples of self-rebellion. That's the #1 block. And a little bit later, I'll talk a little bit how to address it.
Excellent. So what do you recommend to break the blocks?
Okay. The password, I think we all realized, is the word commitment, which of course is easier said than done to stick with in terms of really getting on the right track to lose weight and keep it off. But when I talk about commitment, what I especially want to talk about is a commitment to mindfulness, a commitment to self-discipline, and a commitment to being totally honest with yourself. Let me first talk about, again, addiction to self-rebellion, then I'll make a statement or 2 about the other blocks and all of that mindfulness. So here's what I suggest to do about addiction to self-rebellion, particularly in terms of eating more than you should or things you shouldn't. Okay. So this is a little strategy that I came up with many years ago, and I honestly think it's really worth a try. What you do is, before you're eating anything, meal, snack, anything, before you take your spoon, your fork, or it's a hand food in your hand, and take the food, what you do is you clench your hand into a fist. Not too tightly, but tightly enough to feel the tension in your clenched hand. And what you do is, before you take your spoon or your fork, obviously with the hand closed, you're not going to be able to just take food with your hand. And what you do is you go within yourself and you come up with some word or couple of words that are geared towards not rebelling, that are geared towards self-control. It could be just words like don't rebel. It could be the word self-control, self-respect. You can come up with your own word. You can come up with your own sound. Could be even a piece of music. But by clenching your hand, you are holding on tight to the symbol that conveys of self-control. You are then very much at least increasing the odds that you will now eat only what you should and no more than you should. That's the main tool that I really do recommend to get a handle on addiction to self-rebellion. As far as the other blocks, again, I go back to mindfulness. You need to be honest with yourself. In almost any diet or exercise program, especially say diet programs, those kinds of psychological issues, again, anxiety, loyalty, emotional suppression and deprivation, power struggles, those issues usually are not addressed. Most people are not either conscious of those kinds of issues themselves, or they're not steered to be. So what you need to do is take a look and really, again, go within yourself, because maybe you haven't faced you have some underlying anxieties. Maybe you haven't faced you have this loyalty thing that somehow makes you feel almost guilty if you really try to lose weight because you're eating less, and that didn't fit, again, your upbringing. If it's a power struggle relationship, you and your partner need to face that you're really sabotaging not just yourselves, but the relationship. So again, it's a commitment, mindfulness, honesty, and self-discipline to get those blocks acknowledged to yourself, and then to have a chance to get them addressed, to get them resolved, so that you finally have a chance to beat that inner bully or inner critic, as you may call it, and get off the self-sabotage track.
Excellent. You know, Dr. Sidney, what I love about your approach is it is relatable, but it's also sensitive. And you're never condemning, but you always give us the space to be honest with ourselves, with our feelings, and to deal with what's really going on. And you do provide sensitivity around the topic and really practical steps and tools, which I think is valuable for anyone that's trying to have more control in this area.
Well, Melanie, thank you very much for that feedback. That is my intent, and that's the path I want to stay on. So thanks again for saying that. So we ready for you?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm turning the tables on my colleague here. My colleague is Melanie Joy. She is a holistic health specialist. She's the author of a great book called The Grecian Garden. And I feel honored and privileged to be doing this webinar with her. So it's your turn for some questions, Melanie.
I'm ready.
Here we go.
Okay.
Great. So first one, what hormonal imbalance leads to weight gain?
This is a really important question, because when there is a situation you find yourself in where you are having difficulty losing weight, we need to assess the hormones. We need to test and find out what is going on with your hormones that is not allowing your body to maintain a regular weight. So typically what I see are two types of hormone imbalances. I will see either high and low cortisol, or I'll see estrogen dominance. And so whenever I see high and low cortisol, this is typically in response to chronic stress. So when we're under high stress, whether that's with our job, or maybe we're not sleeping well, or relationship difficulty, or financial difficulty, or maybe we're not eating as healthy as we should be, that can all contribute to our stress, and it can cause that cortisol to have really high highs and really low lows. And then the other type of hormone imbalance that I see common with anyone who has trouble losing weight is estrogen dominance. And with estrogen dominance, this can be in both men and women. So with the estrogen dominance, this is where we'll see more of like the belly fat or the hip fat, and it's where your body is not maintaining that estrogen, testosterone, progesterone balance. And this is usually indicating that there is some extra estrogens in your environment. So this could be from chemicals. We call them xenoestrogens, and they tend to mimic estrogen in our body, whether you're a male or a female. So where do these come from? Chemicals and cleaning products, body products, hair products, makeup products. In our environment, if someone is consuming too much soy, or if they're drinking a beer that's made from hops, this can just contribute overall in our bodies to too much estrogen. So whenever there is a hormone imbalance, the first thing I always recommend is to de-stress. So the simplest way to de-stress is first by nourishing ourselves with easy to digest food. So eating anti-inflammatory, and I'm going to talk about that next, but eating anti-inflammatory foods will give your body a physical break from stress. slowing down while we eat and mindfully, chewing our food and taking a moment to, have a restful part of our day is really important when it comes to chronic stress. I also recommend that my clients begin to see either an acupuncturist or a reflexologist or begin doing yoga or walking. And this is just a really gentle way to begin to import and feed yourself what you've chronically overgiven in the past. So where in the past you gave and you gave and you gave, and your hormones now are saying, you can't do that anymore. I need you to rest and feed me. We need a little bit of rest. So resting, de-stressing, I would say would be the first thing to help in a hormone imbalance.
Very important stuff. And speaking of imbalances, next question is also about imbalance. What is blood sugar? How does blood sugar imbalance lead to weight gain?
Yes. So the blood sugar balance is so important. And if you have ever ridden a blood sugar roller coaster where you have a blood sugar high and a blood sugar crash, you know that that is not fun. And what's actually happening is, let's say we were to eat a food that is a highly processed food. Well, when we eat that food, our blood sugar spikes, our pancreas is going to shoot out insulin to lower the blood sugar, and then our adrenals are going to say, the blood sugar is too low, and it's going to spout out cortisol and adrenaline. So if you can imagine being on that type of a roller coaster several times throughout the day, your pancreas is going to get tired of putting out insulin, your adrenals are going to get exhausted from putting out cortisol and adrenaline, and your body is basically exhausting itself all day long just from trying to balance your blood sugar. So this type of stress on the body will contribute to weight gain. Those crashes will actually cause your body to store excess fat. And then once you have that extra adipose tissue, it's now going to contribute to an even further hormone and blood sugar imbalance. So what is the number one thing we have to do with a blood sugar imbalance? We need to be eating regularly. And I see this with so many of my clients. It's where they don't take the time to sit down and eat and to have a solid meal with protein, carbs, and fats. And the protein, carbs, and fat combo is what will keep them satisfied, and it's what will keep their blood sugar balanced. So a lot of times I'll see clients who have gotten into the habit of skipping meals. And when you skip meals, it can contribute to the blood sugar imbalance, and then your body doesn't know when your next meal is coming, and it creates this almost like a starvation mode where your body thinks you're starving and you're really not. So it stores excess fat tissue. So I always recommend for any blood sugar balance is just simply trying to eat regular meals. And typically that looks like you're going to eat every 4 to 5 hours, probably a breakfast, a lunch, and a dinner. And the other thing that's usually a contributing factor to a blood sugar balance is a need for minerals. So when you have utilized up that insulin and that cortisol over and over and over again, your body is losing minerals. And minerals are what help to keep the blood sugar stable. So usually I'll see where someone has a need for chromium, or they have a need for calcium and magnesium. And these minerals combined with eating regularly can help to balance your blood sugar.
I want to personally thank you for connecting blood sugar levels with minerals. I didn't know that. And that sounds awfully important. Mm-hmm. So, we speak for myself right there. That was great information.
Good.
Okay, we got one more question for you.
Okay.
I don't know how many people have heard the term gut health. I know I have. Heard it first about a year and a half ago. And even though I've been in the psychology field for I don't know how many decades, the term gut health was new to me. And I knew from the little bit of reading I started to do, it was really important. So why don't you tell us, what does gut health have to do with weight loss?
Wow. Gut health is everything. It is so important. You know, there's that one phrase, all roads lead to the gut, and it's true. The gut is so important for our hormones to be balanced, for our blood sugar to be balanced, and for our body to actually feed and repair itself. It all starts in the gut. And there's a couple places where we can have issues in our gut that can contribute to a problem with weight. And one of those is if our gut lining is chronically inflamed, that means that we have a source of physical inflammation on the body all the time. So when that gut lining gets inflamed, it's almost like, if you can imagine, if you had a wound on your hand, you would take care, you would apply salve, you would apply ointment, you would, protect the wound so that it could eventually heal. Well, in our gut, we can have these little inflamed areas in the lining of our gut that if we eat really difficult to digest foods over and over and over again, the lining always stays inflamed, and that can create a problem with our body's ability to absorb nutrients. Well, now we're talking about a total body problem because it's our gut that feeds the nutrients for our heart, for our adrenals, for our thyroid, for our brain. So the gut lining is so important to keep healthy. And then the other thing with the gut is if there is any imbalance in our beneficial bacteria, this beneficial bacteria within our gut, it's also called the microbiome. And this beneficial bacteria can very easily get out of balance if we're under chronic stress, if we take too many antibiotics, if we're eating a lot of refined grains, refined carbs, refined sugars. It's really easy for us to get an infection where one of those beneficial bacteria, it may be a bacteria, virus, parasite, candida, one of those little bacteria that isn't supposed to be increased, all of a sudden all that excess sugar, now we've got an imbalance, and now we've got what's called dysbiosis. That's where there's an imbalance in our gut bacteria, and those infections are another layer of chronic stress that can also affect our weight. Because when you have an infection that's affecting your gut, you are now going to be craving food that your body would have never wanted had it not had that infection. So a lot of times if someone has a yeast infection affecting their gut, a candida infection, or a viral infection affecting their gut, all of a sudden they are craving carbs and sugars, and it's almost like an addiction, but it's because of the imbalance in their beneficial bacteria. So the problem starts there with, now we're feeding these bad bacteria something that's causing them to grow, and we're essentially not being fed the proper nutrients. We're feeding the bad guys and we're not able to feed our body as well. So when it comes to gut health, what's really important is eating easy to digest, nutrient dense foods, which, guys, to make it simple, real food. Just simply eating real food and avoiding processed food is the absolute easiest thing that you can do. And certainly if there's gut inflammation, there's more specific protocols like utilizing bone broth or fermented vegetables or probiotics. There's a place for all of those. And even if there's an infection, sometimes I will recommend an herbal antimicrobial like oil of oregano or black walnut seed. So there's all different protocols to help when someone's gut is inflamed, but the greatest thing is just trying to avoid those difficult to digest foods. And that can be lowering your level of chronic stress, chronic physical stress, which is then going to help your body to be able to maintain a healthy weight.
Well, I actually want to give sort of an editorial statement. And then I guess we can throw it open to questions. I'm actually going to have two questions myself for you, okay, but I'll hold off. We'll see, and I will get the audience involved if they have some questions. Okay. What do I mean by an editorial? I just need to say this. What I'm sitting here feeling right now about the fact that we have decided, Melanie, to do this webinar together is exactly what I know my inspiration was originally, which is to make this be an integrative approach.
Mm-hmm.
to not just have my patients dealing with the psychological end and not just have your patients, I know you've certainly oriented to an integrative approach already, but not just dealing with the nutritional realities. The fact is that this integrative approach, dealing with the psychological end, if it's indicated, but also certainly dealing with nutritional and dietary considerations, that integration, I think, is a must. And I'm just, from that standpoint alone, I'm thrilled that we're doing this. So I'll save my question or two. We want to throw things open to anyone in the audience.
Okay. I'm going to see if, okay, so if you guys have any questions, you can type in any questions. We did have an internet question. Someone is asking, if you've tried everything and don't know where to start, what's a good starting point?
Is that question more the psychological end or the nutritional end or both?
Let's start with the psychological. She didn't clarify.
Sure. Well, the starting point is to first realize that you do really need to get an evaluation. You really do yourself a favor to get an evaluation by somebody who specializes in nutrition and diet. Because even though I exclusively do the psychological end of it, as I just said, I think the integrative approach is absolutely necessary. So one thing as a starting point is to get an evaluation. The other thing is the starting point, as I mentioned, is whether you read my book or not, just having heard me list those 6 blocks, is to recognize that there probably is, if you don't have a medical issue, as I mentioned, if you don't have any medication potential side effect issues, and yet you keep staying on the roller coaster for months, if not years, something else is going on. Something under the surface that you may not be the least bit conscious of. So the other favor you do yourself, beside getting an evaluation by a nutritionist, is to, whether again you read my book, just even think about, go within yourself, do you have any of these blocks? You may never have thought about it. You may never have had reason to think about it because nobody's told you. You ought to give it some thought. If you do and you realize you have a block or two of the kinds I listed, maybe there's something that I didn't list that you're feeling, you know what, psychologically, that's another issue I didn't even look at. Recognize that. It doesn't mean you automatically need professional help for it, but that other piece of the starting point is being totally honest with yourself. What's going on psychologically here?
Excellent, and I agree. Testing, you're an individual, so we have to test to determine what's going on, which will help us create a path and a protocol that's very specific to you. One other one, Dr. Sidney, is can you address food addiction?
Yes, and the best way I will address food addiction, I mentioned before how I define addiction, because I'm actually now going to add a piece. So the definition I gave before of addiction is 2 parts. Any behavior in control of you, rather than you're in control of the behavior, and I'll get to food in a second, and as a result, it causes you some kind of harm. Again, psychological harm, relational harm, physical harm. But there's another very important piece now I'm going to add to the definition of addiction. It's one word, and it's called anesthesia. Now, what is anesthesia? Anesthesia is obviously a numbing of pain. It does not by any means in this case have to, nor do I intend it to mean physical pain. I'm talking emotional pain of some type. Could be clinically speaking, you're depressed, you're anxious, you have OCD, you have PTSD. But I'm not only talking clinical pain, clinical diagnosable pain. I'm talking about the pain of a breakup of a relationship, the pain of the loss of a job, any kind of emotional pain like that. We all, in a state of emotional pain, could really use some type of anesthetic. Well, what is, as much as anything, I mentioned and I'm sorry, can you still see me?
Now I can. We're good.
Yeah, I just got a phone call. I'm sorry I didn't turn
That's
that
okay.
off. Okay, so back to anesthesia. If you're in emotional pain, it's nice to feel some kind of numbness. Well, the pleasure of food, the enjoyment of food can serve in part as a numbing from the emotional pain you're in. I mentioned before about emotional suppression and emotional deprivation. One of the factors, and I'm not saying it's the only factor by any stretch, but one of the factors about food as an addiction can be that it has this anesthetizing effect for at least the time you're eating and maybe for a little bit of time afterwards. And that's how I mainly mean food as an addiction.
Excellent. And Dr. Sidney, did you have any other questions before I wrap it up? I'm not seeing any other questions.
Okay, so I have two quick questions.
Okay,
One of them will be real quick.
Okay.
I'm glad you brought up probiotics. Do you recommend a specific type of antibiotic and a specific amount? Because I know there's specific quantities. Do you recommend some specifics?
So my absolute favorite probiotics would be from Claire Labs, and they do a line that's called Therabiotic, and so their line is a multi-strain probiotic, which I utilize a lot with my clients. And I also like, there was a company that made Prescript Assist. It was a soil-based probiotic because sometimes if people have histamine issues, they're not going to do as well with the lactobacillus and the bifidobacteria. So I can swap and I can use the soil-based probiotic. But now on the market, the only one that's got the soil-based is the Garden of Life Primal Defense. So I kind of rotate between those two depending on, you know, if they're having histamine issues or if their gut is really sensitive, I might use the soil-based one. Or if they're really, really sensitive, we may just have to use smaller dosages, and I'll have them get the powder and we'll just use really tiny dosages. Typically what I recommend is to get rid of the infection first, and then we'll go on with some probiotics.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. My other question is about none other than gut inflammation. And where I want to go with this is to bring up something I assume you're certainly aware of. Mentioned before, it's only been about 1.5 years or 2 years since anything along the lines of gut health became something that I was, you know, very intrigued by and knew there was something relevant for me to know about. So I read that 95, and if this is true, I want to make sure I have it right, 95% of the body's serotonin is produced in the gut.
Yes.
So my question, great. So my question is that I haven't thought of asking until you brought up inflammation. Is there, to your knowledge, some connection between gut inflammation and serotonin production or something that undermines serotonin? Is there any connection there?
Yes, absolutely. And that's an excellent question. And it really goes back to how the gut and the brain are connected, because serotonin is one of those feel-good, we think of it as that feel-good brain chemical, and it's actually produced by the gut bacteria in our gut. So going back to that dysbiosis, if we have an infection, if we have an overgrowth of candida, if we have a virus, if we have a bacteria, a parasite that has overstayed its welcome and has overgrown, our mind is not, we're not going to be having that calm, feel good, satisfied feeling that we would think about when we think of serotonin and dopamine. We are probably going to be having an internal anxiety because our body is not getting that feel-good neurotransmitter. So to balance that out, it's really about correcting that infection. And from what I've seen, a lot of people are living with infections that have been going on for a long time. So in other words, they may have traveled overseas and gotten an infection and have had little problems ever since they traveled overseas. Or maybe they got food poisoning one time and it seemed like they were better, but then they developed other non-digestive related symptoms after that. So it's these little infections that can be chronic and they can be underlying. They're very difficult to assess on a kind of broad picture medical testing. It's going to take more fine-tuned testing. But once we know what that infection is, we can address it, get the gut bacteria in balance, and then that person is going to start creating their own healthy neurotransmitters, serotonin being one of them again.
Thanks. That's just the information I wanted clarified.
Perfect. Okay, I'm going to see. I don't think I see any other questions. So those of you that have joined us, thank you so much for joining us today. I do want to let you know that if you have any further questions for either myself or Dr. Sidney, Dr. Sidney's website is drsidspeaks.com. He also posts great content on Instagram, Sidney Cohen Ph.D. You can find me through my website, nourishedineden.com, or my Instagram handle, nourishedineden. And hey, if you guys want to see another webinar, go ahead and shoot one of us a message if you have any webinar topics or any other questions. But other than that, I think that's it. Dr. Sidney, did you want to add anything?
No, just I want to thank everyone for showing up. And of course, we both hope this was really helpful. And we really appreciate you being here.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody. Have a good day.
Bye-bye. Okay, can you still hear me?